Did you know that one of the 9 bodies found on a mountain slope in February 1959 was missing its tongue? I'll explain that in a bit. But first, let me admit something. When I started digging into this story, I figured it was probably just an ordinary winter accident. Rarely have I been so clearly wrong about anything, because this isn't just a story about an accident. 9 experienced, strong, level-headed hikers cut their tent open from the inside one night and threw themselves out into minus 30-degree cold at what looked like a moment with no explanation at all. For more than 60 years, the question went unanswered. Books were written, films were made, government stayed silent. Today I'll tell you what was found. But I want to say up front, I'm not going to end this by saying everything's explained, case closed, because that wouldn't be honest. Science has given us a very strong answer, but even that answer still has open gaps in it. Let's go through it together. Those who set out January 1959, the Soviet Union, at one of the tensest points of the Cold War. Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, leads a group of 9, 7 men, 2 women, including a war veteran. These weren't amateurs. Each of them was on this trip to earn the Soviet Union's highest hiking certification. Their goal, Mount Otorten, one of the most difficult peaks to reach at the time. Along the way, one member, Yuri Yudin, falls ill and turns back. He hugs his friends goodbye and watches them disappear into the snow. Without knowing it, he's living the moment he'll spend the rest of his life asking about why them and not me. The last entries in their diaries are full of jokes. There's no trace of fear, just young people who loved what they were doing. On the night of February 1st, everything changed. What happened in the tent? The group strays slightly from their planned route and sets up camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, known locally as Dead Mountain. When the expected telegram doesn't arrive, a search begins. Weeks later, what's found silences even the most experienced investigators. The tent has been cut open from the inside. Think about that for a second. The entrance could have been opened in seconds. They didn't use it. Whatever was happening to them, the thought of get to the door apparently never had time to form. Inside, though, everything is strangely orderly. Boots lined up in a row, clothes folded. The stove was never lit. 9 people left behind everything they needed to survive, as if they were fleeing something more dangerous than the cold itself. Keep that in mind because we'll come back to it shortly. The footprints tell a story. Footprints leading down toward the forest are found below the tent, some barefoot. But these tracks aren't chaotic. They're orderly, moving in line. Not the tracks of people fleeing in panic, but of people moving together. At the edge of the forest, under a cedar tree, next to the remains of a small fire, 2 men are found wearing almost nothing. The tree's branches are broken up to 5 meters high. Someone climbed it in the dark and snapped them with bare hands. A little further up, 3 more are found facing the tent. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, Slobodin. They'd been trying to go back, against the wind, toward the tent. They fell one by one, each making it a little further than the last. Kolmogorova, the closest, was found just a few hundred meters from the tent. Now the question is, why did 9 people split into groups? When the answer comes, everything will look different. The 4th group, the remaining 4 aren't found for months. In May, when the snow melts, they're found in a small ravine under 4 meters of snow. This is the moment the case turns from an ordinary accident into a legend. They weren't wearing their own clothes. They were wearing clothing that belonged to the friends found by the cedar tree. Survival experts read it this way. Once it was clear their friends could no longer be helped, the survivors took the extra layers for themselves. Even at the edge of hopelessness, they were still thinking, still fighting. But the medical reports describe something else. These 4 had severe internal injuries resembling high-speed crash trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding, with almost no marks on the outside. A doctor at the time said, "No human strength could explain this." And one of them, this is where that tongue detail comes back, was missing tongue tissue. Investigators attributed this to natural decomposition after months in water, not to any animal attack or other injury. Traces of radiation are found on some of the clothing. Soviet authorities closed the investigation quickly, classify the files, and sum up the official conclusion in a single phrase: an unknown, compelling force. The area is closed to civilians for 3 years. That silence gets filled by 60 years of theories, from local tribes to secret military tests to strange lights in the sky. None of them quite fit, because none of them explain the lack of theft, the lack of any other tracks, or a mechanism that could account for those injuries. If this has kept you curious so far, subscribe to the channel, because what I'm about to tell you changes the whole direction of this story. When the math stepped in, the avalanche theory had been dismissed almost immediately. The slope looked too flat, there'd been no fresh snowfall that night, no avalanche debris was found, and most importantly, there was a 9-hour gap between when the tent was pitched and when disaster struck. Avalanches don't wait 9 hours, right? When the case reopened in 2019, 2 Swiss scientists, Alexander Puzerin and Johann Gaume, approached it with math instead of speculation. When they measured the actual terrain under the snow, they found the slope was steeper than it looked, close to the critical threshold. And the flat, comfortable platform the hikers had cut for their tent had weakened the snow layer beneath it. So why 9 hours later? The answer was wind. That night's winds had been quietly depositing extra snow, invisibly. It wasn't snow falling from the sky, it was snow being carried by the wind off the ground, so it didn't show up in weather records. As the hours passed, the load grew, and close to midnight, the weakened layer finally gave way. This wasn't a classic massive avalanche. It was a smaller, dense slab of snow, roughly 5 meters and about the weight of a car, that dropped directly onto the tent. Because it was small, it left little trace, and within hours the same winds buried and erased it. The hikers had laid their sleeping bags over their skis, so underneath them wasn't soft snow, but hard wood. Simulations adapted from animation technology developed by Disney, combined with data from 1970s automotive crash tests, showed that a heavy snow slab falling onto a hard surface could produce exactly the kind of injuries described in the medical reports. But hold on, is everything actually explained? I have to be honest with you here. This explanation accounts for a lot, but not every expert agrees with it, and their questions aren't unreasonable. If the hikers were walking calmly, not panicking, why didn't they take even basic survival gear with them? Why were some of them wearing almost nothing? On the radiation, some experts argue the measured levels were too high to be explained by simple secondhand contamination from a workplace. There's also debate over how much snow was actually on the tent to begin with. The first search team reportedly shoveled extra snow onto it to keep it from blowing away before authorities arrived, which muddies later measurements. So I'm not telling you the mystery is closed. I'm telling you this is the strongest, most evidence-backed explanation we currently have, and it's far more credible than monsters or secret weapons. But science is still working on some of the details here, and that's completely normal. The most likely version of that night, close to midnight, the snow slab falls and several people are injured instantly. The exit is pinned under the weight, breathing becomes difficult. Cutting the tent open is the only way out. Their gear is unreachable, their injured friends need urgent help, so they leave everything behind and head down toward the forest. At the tree line, they build a fire. When it becomes clear it isn't warm enough, 3 of the strongest take the risk of heading back up toward the tent. The remaining 4 take their friends' clothing and descend into the ravine, digging into the snow for shelter from the wind. And there, the snow above them collapses. In the final stages of severe hypothermia, the human brain does something strange. People start removing their own clothes. This is known as paradoxical undressing, and it's been documented in cold weather cases around the world. Conclusion. This isn't a story about 9 people who simply died in an ordinary winter accident. It's a story about their friendship, their courage, and the fact that they never gave up on each other until the end. 3 who tried to go back for their injured friends. 4 who gave up their own warmth for the survivors. 9 people who held on to each other to the very end. The answer wasn't a monster, but it isn't entirely simple either. It's the mountain, the wind, physics, and human psychology all together. Maybe that's the biggest lesson in this story. Sometimes behind the scariest mysteries there are no monsters, just a force of nature that can be explained and is still terrifying all the same. If you enjoyed this video, a like goes a long way. You'd be surprised how much it helps the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss more evidence-based investigations like this one, and let me know in the comments, do you think there are still gaps in this explanation? I read the comments. See you in the next investigation.